Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Kensington Runestone. Did Vikings reach Minnesota? Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1898, Swedish immigrant Olof Ohman was clearing land on his farm near Kensington, Minnesota, when his plough turned up a flat stone slab. Engraved on its surface was an inscription in runic characters, the writing system of medieval Scandinavia. Translated, it described a group of 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians who had reached the area in the year 1362, finding 10 of their companions dead and red with blood, with a message of appeal for deliverance from evil. The Kensington Runestone, if genuine, would prove that Norse explorers reached the American interior 130 years before Columbus, and 1,000 kilometers further inland than the confirmed Norse settlement at Meadows in Newfoundland. Most mainstream scholars consider it a 19th-century forgery. A minority argue it is genuine. The debate has continued for over a century, generating more heat than any comparable archaeological controversy in American history, and the physical evidence remains genuinely contested. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Out-of-place artifacts, objects found in geological or archaeological contexts that predate their supposed invention, represent one of the most contentious categories in all of science. The scientific establishment's response to such discoveries has historically fallen into 2 camps. The first is skeptical investigation, careful re-examination of the dating, the context, and the object itself, which often reveals a mundane explanation. The second, rarer response is acknowledgement, a formal revision of the assumed timeline in light of evidence that cannot be explained away. Both responses have legitimate roles. The history of archaeology includes many cases where enthusiastic amateur discoveries of supposedly ancient anomalies turned out to be forgeries, misidentified natural formations, or artifacts simply displaced from their original layer by post-depositional disturbance. Critical scrutiny of extraordinary claims is not closed-mindedness. It is scientific responsibility, but it must be applied consistently. The same rigorous scrutiny applied to anomalous claims must also be applied to the mainstream assumptions those claims challenge. And sometimes, when the evidence is examined honestly, the mainstream assumption is the one that breaks. The significance of genuine out-of-place artifacts goes beyond the objects themselves. Each one represents a data point in a larger argument about ancient human capability, about what our ancestors understood, what they could engineer, and how much of that knowledge has been lost. The ancient world was not populated by primitive minds in primitive bodies. The brains that looked up at the night sky 40,000 years ago were neurologically identical to ours. Given sufficient time and motivation, they could have discovered and lost almost anything we know today. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Kensington Runestone, "Did Vikings reach Minnesota?" is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Kensington Runestone weighs approximately 91 kilograms and measures 76 by 41 by 15 centimeters. The inscription of 202 characters describes a 1362 expedition of Scandinavians who reached the area while exploring west from Vinland. The stone was found beneath the roots of an aspen tree, which Ohman estimated was at least 40 years old, consistent with a pre-1858 deposition date if the age estimate is accurate. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the runic inscription uses forms that linguists in 1898 identified as inconsistent with authentic medieval Norse runes, leading to the dominant scholarly opinion that it was forged by Ohman or an acquaintance. Later researchers, including Scandinavian linguist Erik Wahlgren, published detailed analyses supporting the forgery hypothesis. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Norwegian linguist Knut Johannessen and geologist Scott Wolter have argued in peer-reviewed publications that several rune forms on the Kensington stone that were identified as anachronistic in 1898 have since been found in genuine medieval Scandinavian runic inscriptions discovered after 1898, potentially removing the primary argument against authenticity. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Meadows in Newfoundland provides confirmed archaeological evidence of Norse presence in North America around 1000 AD, approximately 362 years before the date on the Kensington stone. The Norse documented several voyages to Vinland in the sagas, and the motivation for deeper exploration of the interior would have been consistent with documented Norse behavior. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of medieval Norse and Greenlandic Scandinavian settlements were in decline in the mid-14th century, with the Greenland colonies suffering from climate cooling and resource depletion. An expedition of the scale described on the stone, 30 people, would be consistent with the kind of exploratory or resource-finding mission that a struggling colony might send. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The geological weathering of the runic inscription has been studied by geologist Scott Wolter, who argues that the weathering pattern of the inscription grooves is consistent with 600 years of exposure rather than 100 years. potentially supporting an authentic 1362 date. Other geologists disagree with this assessment. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Kensington Runestone. Did Vikings reach Minnesota? This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Kensington Runestone is a 19th-century forgery, most likely produced by Olof Ohman or someone in his community, possibly as a hoax or as an expression of Scandinavian American cultural pride. The initial runic analysis, identifying anachronistic forms, combined with the lack of any other corroborating evidence for a Norse presence in Minnesota, supports the forgery hypothesis. This is the mainstream scholarly position. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Kensington Runestone is a genuine medieval artifact recording a 14th-century Norse expedition that reached the upper Midwest via Hudson Bay and river systems. The rune forms initially identified as anachronistic have been found in authentic medieval inscriptions, undermining the primary argument for forgery. The geological weathering is consistent with a genuine medieval age. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Kensington Runestone was produced in the medieval period, but was not inscribed by Norse explorers in 1362. It may be a memorial stone, a boundary marker, or a commemorative inscription produced by Scandinavian explorers at a different time than stated, possibly as a way of claiming territory or recording an encounter. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Kensington Runestone, did Vikings reach Minnesota, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes runic forms on the Kensington stone that were initially identified as anachronistic, particularly the hooked X rune, have been found in authentic medieval Scandinavian inscriptions dating from the medieval period, weakening the linguistic argument against authenticity. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented geological analysis of the inscription weathering by Scott Wolter, published in his 2004 report, concluded that the weathering profile of the inscription grooves is inconsistent with 100 years of exposure, but consistent with several centuries, though this analysis is disputed by other geologists who have examined the stone. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the find location in central Minnesota is not implausible given the extensive river network connecting the Great Lakes to the upper Midwest, and several claimed Norse artifacts have been found in the upper Mississippi and Red River drainage systems, though none has been definitively authenticated. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Kensington Runestone. Did Vikings reach Minnesota? Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Kensington Runestone remains in the Runestone Museum in Alexandria, Minnesota, where it is the most visited artifact in the state. It is simultaneously a genuine archaeological controversy and a touchstone of Scandinavian American cultural identity in the upper Midwest. The debate about its authenticity is not fully resolved by current evidence, and the runic and geological arguments have become increasingly technical. What is not in dispute is that Norse explorers did reach North America. Elance Orks Meadows proves that. Whether they reached Minnesota 130 years before Columbus remains an open question. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Kensington Runestone. Did Vikings reach Minnesota? From the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Kensington Runestone ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.